At the end of 1937, the Second Sino-Japanese War had seen the Japanese army storm the old imperial capital of Beijing, the international trading port of Shanghai, and pillage the Chinese interior with the rape of Nanjing. Having not yet experienced a major defeat, the imperial army viewed itself as invincible. At the beginning of 1938, despite the fact that its capital was in Japanese hands, and its most capable units were nearly decimated, the Chinese leader Chiang Kai-shek did not offer a truce to the Japanese. The Japanese then in turn refused to negotiate with the Chinese. This miscalculation all but confirmed the war was just getting started and would continue well into the next year. The Japanese, however, were not yet prepared for a protracted long-term war in China, and with the blessing of the emperor ordered for a year-long halt of offensive operations, so the Japanese could expand their army and industry for a lengthened war. The Japanese sent an envoy from Tokyo to the generals in China to ensure they were on board for the year-long hiatus on offensive operations. The generals thanked the envoy, and despite the approval of the emperor on the plan, the generals almost immediately started planning offensive operations for the coming weeks. The generals planned their attacks knowing they would not receive reinforcements from Tokyo and would face a challenging number of Chinese divisions ahead. The insubordinate generals decided on a two-pronged attack from the north and south, with the ultimate goal being the important city of Wuhan. Wuhan was home to 138 war industry factories and was the largest industrial center in China after the fall of Shanghai. The generals believed this would be a knockout blow for the Chinese army. However, the Chinese knew of Wuhan's importance and became determined to stop the Japanese at every opportunity. The ambitious plan commenced on January 28th, as the Japanese army ordered the Nanjing-based army northward towards the city of Suzhou. The city of Suzhou was along the Grand Canal and an important railway juncture that would allow the Japanese to have a railway line along the path to Wuhan. The Japanese faced fierce resistance along the Huai River, which slowed the Japanese advance from the southern group greatly. From the northern group, however, the campaign started with a success as the military governor of the Shandong province gave up the city of Jinan and a Yellow River crossing to the Japanese without having fired a shot. The next month or so saw chaotic advances, flanking moves, and counterattacks as the Chinese sought to keep Japanese supply lines under threat. By March 24th, however, the Japanese reached the city of Taierzhuang, which was an extremely important point on the road to Suzhou. At Taierzhuang, the Chinese set the stage for a showdown as the last of the full-strength German-trained Chinese units dug into the city ready to fight. The Chinese decision to use the last of its elite units, not in an open head-to-head engagement with the Japanese, but in a dense urban center friendly to defenders, proved to be the right choice. The commander of the elite units hoped the unknowing Japanese would dig into a grinding slaughter inside the city, which would give an opening for the German-trained units to encircle the Japanese around the city. On March 24th, the first attempt made by the Japanese to penetrate the city resulted in failure, but the second attack by the Japanese resulted in the perimeter being breached and left Chinese units rushing to counterattack. The Chinese brought in newly arrived German-made 150mm howitzers, which proved to be devastating. As the attacks continued, the Chinese continued to defend with fanatical resistance, and having learned from their previous failure in Shanghai, the Chinese shifted their strategy from open street fighting to grueling house-to-house combat, which resulted in high losses on both sides. As fighting continued, Japanese morale declined, as Chinese forces were able to claw back some of the land the Japanese had taken. Eventually, on April 5th, the Japanese ordered a total withdrawal from Taierzhuang. The chaotic retreat resulted in the Japanese leaving all artillery and heavy equipment behind, as Chinese units nearly encircled the disorganized Japanese. For the first time since the start of the war, the Chinese army stood their ground against the Japanese and erased the fiction of Japanese invincibility. The Japanese acknowledged the fierce Chinese resistance in their war diary, noting no Chinese surrendered. Instead, they fought until their dead filled their trenches. All in all, the Japanese suffered 5,800 losses and the Chinese took between 12,000 and 18,000 losses. The moral of the war-torn nation, however, skyrocketed after news of the battle, with Chinese propaganda having a field day in the press. The Japanese attempted to cover up the failure, and eventually gave up its formal policy of a one-year hiatus on offensives and sent major supplies and divisions to China. The Japanese were able to capture Suzhou in late May with the support from Tokyo, and were able to continue the drive up the Yangtze River. Looking back, the Battle of Taierzhuang gave the Chinese much-needed time to further evacuate industry and reorganize its army for the long road ahead, and drastically delayed Japan's drive on Wuhan, which would only fall in late October, meaning Japan would never again get the opportunity to conquer the new Chinese capital, and lastly gave Japan the taste of a Chinese victory in their mouths.